was wondering, aside from Mick Foley and Owen Hart, who back in the territory days were some of the thriftiest and cheapest wrestlers you were around or heard stories about? How far would some of the guys go to stretch a dollar on the road?
Oh, good Lord. Troy Graham was notoriously, what's the word, penurious? Yeah, I'd always get a pop from the Jew over there. Troy Graham was careful with his money, probably except when it came to chemicals and herbs and spices. There were a number of people. I mean, some guys were careful because they had to be. And Bobby Fulton, we've joked about the story before. When he came here he was the opening match babyface when he first started here in like 1981. And he'd worked independents back when there was very few of those for about, I think, 4 or 5 years, since he'd been like 15, 16, and he's from Ohio. But finally he's working a territory, but he has no money. And the car that he bought to come into the territory here, it broke down. He left it on the side of the road and never went back for it because he'd only paid $50 for it to begin with. Right. That's why he started riding with me and my mom. So some of those guys, had to be careful, but the all-time, at least I know, legendary, careful individual in the wrestling business, and I'm sure some people can go back to the 50s and, or whatever, and top me on this, but Angelo Poffo, big, and I'm sure Lanny will probably note this with pride. His gimmick in ICW, what was his gimmick? You know everything.
The miser.
The masked miser. He had this big sparkly cowl and jacket and a mask to match and everything. Angelo Poffo always looked great in the ring and his gear looked good, shit like that. But he was the miser. I mean, he was a guy who would take it so far as to go in a restaurant and get hot water and use ketchup for fucking soup. And Rip Rogers, because Rip, was a protege of the Poffo family in ICW. And he says that one of Angelo's rules was don't wash your clothes any more than you absolutely have to, because the suds, the detergent, will break down the fibers and cause you to have to buy new clothes quicker. I mean, whatever the fucking case it may be, it was not a rib. But that's why we joked with William Harding that he's the only guy in the fucking history of the world ever got $1,000 out of Angelo Poffo.
That's right. Yeah.
That sugar hole challenge deal, it went awry. So he probably, and I mean, for him to make that, and the boys called him that, I think, beforehand. We should get Lanny to verify that if possible. But it was a true life, real gimmick, and he has to be noted for that. And it for the dedication alone to be that cheap is amazing.
And it's interesting that he passed it on, because I can't speak about Lanny, but I'd always heard that about Randy. Randy was the same way.
Well, I'm pretty sure Lanny's judicious about how he spends his money. Yes. And Randy was, because as a matter of fact, first time that I met Elizabeth was, and I think I'd met Randy maybe one other time. I don't know. But at any rate, was in 80. When did they go to New York? 85?
They went to New York in 85, yes.
Okay, because we left right before they settled that whole thing. We left Tennessee, and they brought Savage and Lanny and Angelo in after they'd settled their deal. So I just that was the thing, is they came in. I missed out on all those big houses, right? I was in Osceola and finishing up, and they were in Rupp Arena drawing 8,000 people. Anyway, we met them because Bobby and Dennis and I, and obviously both those guys knew Randy from working for Goulas. And we were staying at a Fairfield Inn, which is what we usually stayed in in those days. They're like the discount, low-cost lodging part of the Marriott chain. They were nice, but they were cheap. We were careful with our money because we worked fucking Memphis. And there was one of Randy was there because WWF was in town. Maybe it was Cincinnati when we ran the same night, or wherever the fuck it may have been. But I remarked it. I said, fuck, he's a fucking champion or whatever, and he's staying here at the goddamn deal. And Bobby just looked at me and said, he's not spending that much money. and there you go.